obviously this is the part that we'll cut out leading up to this. So.
Where are you from originally?
Well, it's a small town. No. I grew up in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Why?
No, somebody gave me a hard time.
Because I drink Mountain Dew?
No, I drink Mountain Dew. And somebody's like, they're like, well, you're from the Midwest. And I was like, I am. And I was like, I don't want to be tagged in that photo. Like, I felt personally attacked by that. So I'm just curious.
Do you know this was initially made to mix with something, and it's a disgusting concept I've never tried.
What?
They made Mountain Dew to be able to mix it with whiskey.
Ew.
Yeah, it sounds terrible, and I don't know why you would do that to whiskey. But supposedly I don't even know if that's true or not.
Did you learn it on the internet?
Something people
Everything
say.
Everything is true on the internet. No, I've had. I'm done with that conversation.
Okay, well, we'll circle back around. But other than Mountain Dew and whiskey combined, what is your go-to drink after a nice, long, shitty day?
Absolutely not whiskey. In no world is it whiskey. If I'm at home in the privacy of my own home, it is a White Claw. Because I'm a big fan of the seltzer race, the arms seltzer race that we have happening in our country, that you can get everything to be a seltzer right now, and I really like that. If I am in public and I have to look like an adult, it will be red wine of some kind.
So the White Claws, are you the only person on the planet that drinks the watermelon ones, or do you throw those away too?
No, watermelon is fine. All of the flavors are fine.
Okay.
Like I don't. Blackberry, I think probably one of the superior ones. Pineapple, pretty superior. Their variety pack 3 really is your superior variety pack. I could go on.
I didn't know they were numbered.
Oh yeah, that you got 1.
I just know that I have a garage fridge that's full of the watermelon flavor of like every kind of seltzer brand out there.
It's usually not your best flavor. Although sometimes mango also a little bit questionable. I don't know why we are such a mango train, but everything is mango flavored in this world right now. But But if I'm at home in the privacy of my own home and I don't have to seem like an adult in any way, I'm just going to be drinking some White Claw.
Drinking TV static.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what that stuff tastes like. I can't.
It's delightful. It is delicious. It is. You don't feel gross. It's nice. It's very nice. I don't know why you're judging me.
I mean, I don't even like seltzer, so that's probably why. It's got something to do with it.
That might be why.
If you don't like seltzer, don't try it.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on again. I know the first time we talked, it was kind of to talk through this concept. You brought up the fact that we should probably introduce people. Right. And so on that podcast, that wasn't really the goal. It was to just kind of talk out the ideas. But yes, for, people that don't know you, I mean, just kind of run us through a little bit of your time in the industry or even before that.
Oh, God. Do you want, okay. So, hello. My name is Lindsey McClain. I hate you so much. You're giving like a weird face.
That's just my face.
Oh, well, that explains it. My name is Lindsey McClain. I am the Executive Vice President of the First Coast Apartment Association here in Jacksonville, Florida. I started in the industry 2008-ish, somewhere in there.
I can tell you what LinkedIn says.
Oh, well, shoot, something should. I started in 2008. I had moved to Florida. I had a bachelor's degree, decided I wasn't going to do that, and then didn't really know what to do. Ended up...
Journalism?
Broadcast news.
Yeah, what made you do that?
I always really liked the news business. I always really liked the idea of storytelling through visual, specifically, finding people, learning their experiences, being able to share that information, talking to people, and then putting that together in a way that was easy to understand with visuals that made sense and all of those things. Turns out...
You've always wanted to be a video podcaster.
Yeah, obviously. Didn't even know that was the thing. Turns out I probably should have realized more my niche would have been documentary storytelling, because the short form that is news and broadcast news is soul sucking. It's really difficult. It wasn't until I started actually like doing it that I realized how difficult it was to put a microphone in somebody's face and say, oh, your house is burning down behind you and you've lost all your pets. How do you feel about that? Or, the same reason you see all these crazy people, it's hard to find somebody that's willing to talk to you. So you end up you have to get it in, you have a deadline, you have to get your story done. So you're just going to find Joe that'll talk to you on the street, and Joe is a weird guy and Joe's going to give you a weird soundbite, but you just got to get a soundbite. So local news was really not where I realized I wanted to do that. Also, I got kind of, you develop, a dark sense of humor to deal with it, because every single day you're dealing with incredibly tragic things, right? You're reporting these awful things, school buses falling off of cliffs, or, school shootings, or really terrible, dark things. And that's the life you're living. That's every single day you're dealing with that. And so you end up with kind of a really dark sense of humor to offset that. And I remember I was producing one day, and when you're the producer, you determine the set of the stories, what order they're going in. So you're not necessarily reporting out in the field, but you're in the office and you're going, okay, here's going to be our lineup, here's our package, here's our blocks that we're doing between in our breaks and all that kind of stuff. And so we had a story, and this was in central Indiana, but we had a story where a farmer had been married to his wife for like 70 years or something. It was a super long lifetime romance. And she had brought him a glass of lemonade out to the farm, and he ran over her with a tractor by accident because he was an older man and he didn't see her. And so he had killed his wife by accident running her over with the tractor. And I remember one of the jobs when you're a producer is you tag the story. So you give it a name, even though that's not the name that goes on TV. And I named it, She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy.
Oh my God. And
I remember being like, this is like, is this the path I really want to walk for the rest of my life? So I kind of had just a moment where I was like, this isn't, I don't think the place I want to live the rest of my life is in this place where you're just dealing with these things every single day. And I didn't think that was the way I needed to go about the rest of my life. So
you thought, since you can't have a tractor and live in an apartment, that the apartment industry was the place to go?
No, I actually, I had lived in Indiana and I moved to Florida. Decided my mother was like, hey, guess what? You went to college, get a job. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And so I ended up working at Disney and was looking for an apartment. And I walked into affordable apartments that are right behind the Magic Kingdom parking lot for employees. It was closer to the end of the day, and I realize now how rude that was. But they closed at maybe 6 o'clock, and I think I walked in at like 5:45. And now, knowing what I know, like, but the manager very graciously actually was the one who offered to tour me, I think because the leasing agents would have murdered him. Mm-hmm. He took me on the tour. We started chatting. Just like while we were on the tour, he showed me the apartments. I didn't actually qualify to live there because they were tax credit apartments, and Disney paid just enough that I didn't qualify to live there. But he was like, hey, I'm actually looking to hire a leasing agent. He goes, you have a ton of experience. Why don't you come work for me? And so I interviewed with him. It was a great opportunity. Started doing that full-time 5 days a week. And then I worked at Disney on the weekends. So I did that for several years in Orlando, and then ended up moving up in it was Riverstone before they were part of Greystar. Ended up moving up, ending up at a different property, at a conventional property. So my first one I leased at was tax credit. I don't remember the exact units, somewhere in the 200s. That was like a 60% tax credit. Ended up at a conventional community that was 560 units. Then ended up at a mid-rise, high-end luxury one that was only like 115 units, 2 buildings, super tiny, but very high rents for the area and at the time. They had been built to be condos, and then I don't mean to laugh,
conversion, but yeah, that went well.
Yeah, they had been built to be condos, and then the market just bottomed.
Definition of great ideas on paper.
Yeah, and so leased to those. That was great, and then ended up having a really good relationship with my apartment guide rep, Diana Gauss, who is wonderful and awesome, and still to this day one of my favorite people. But she was like, hey, we have an opening at Apartment Guide, we're for a sales executive, you should interview for it. And I was okay. And so why not? And so I did that for a while, and I did that for about 4 more years and loved that. Did sales executive for Apartment Guide. Through that, ended up moving from Orlando to Jacksonville. that was a great opportunity. Did that here for several years. And then, Amanda, who had been with the First Coast Department Association for years and years and years and did an incredible job as their associate director, ended up being married and moving to Tampa. And so that position was available. And, somebody was like, hey, you should talk to Peggy Queen. This job is open and, you might be good at it. I was like, cool. And so I talked to her and then, was there for a couple of years, and Peggy retired and I took over for her. So kind of been just a weird journey on that.
So I've abandoned my inbred family approach, and I'm thinking it's more like the mafia kind of thing. Like once you get in, you don't get out, right? And so I think
You're
that's
part of the family.
Yeah, and so I mean that's kind of how this worked out, and I think a lot of us have a similar story where you were kind of looking but kind of not, and somebody's like, hey, there's this great thing going on over here, and ends up happening, and off we go. So.
Yeah. Somebody once told me never turn down an interview. Like, you can't, even if it's not a thing you're interested in, you might as well learn what's out there or learn the value that somebody thinks you might have. Mm-hmm. So, I was just like, okay. I've never had, when somebody was like, hey, we think you'd be good at this, I've never said no.
Yeah. Well,
I've had interviews where I've interviewed and been like, this is not
well, that's
my
it.
thing.
Yeah. So I guess there's two things there for me. Is one, I firmly believe that interviewing is a perishable skill, and so when you don't do it, you're not as good at it. And if you really wanted that job and you haven't had an interview in 5 years, you might not be doing your best in that interview. So yeah, I agree with that. Never turn down an interview. And I think the next piece is a job is a lot like a relationship. It's got to work for both people. It's got to be a good fit in both directions. So just because you sit down and go through the interview process, when that offer comes, if it comes, that you still got to assess it. Don't just take it because they gave you the offer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So I've ended up here and I've loved it. I love the association. Association management, I wasn't even aware was a thing that existed, in this world. And now that I'm in it, I see how valuable it is and how important it is and how rewarding it is, to get to work with our volunteers and to get to do the things we do and put on the events we get to put on. And it's just a really fun field.
It's funny learning how many different associations there are. So not just obviously in the apartment industry, but like these random, I don't know, there's a whole big thing with blinds a couple years ago where they converted to cordless blinds, and it was basically the Blind Manufacturers Association, and all got together and decided they weren't going to make corded blinds anymore. Yeah. It's like, it's associations for everything.
Oh, absolutely. And they affect your lives in ways you don't even realize. I mean, there's that great story about the Almond Association that got together a bunch of years ago and decided that they were going to promote the benefits of almonds. And now you ask anyone, you're like, oh, almonds are healthy. And that's just a fact that you think you know.
Are you about to ruin my life? Almonds aren't healthy?
I mean, I think they're healthy, but like the Walnut Association didn't get together and were like, let's promote walnuts.
True.
But you go, what's a healthy nut? Almonds. It's crazy how much that then influences the rest of our world and what we think. And,
Well, so in the realm of topics I'd like to discuss with you about the associations in general, I think that kind of segues into some of the lobbying and stuff that we do, kind of getting together as an association, as an organization, or even at the higher level, like with the state of Florida. I think we've done a lot of good things in terms of laws. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the emotional support animal stuff.
Yeah. When you are part of the association, a lot of the things that are in your face are the education and the networking, right? Most of the time when people are a member of our association, they've come to a class, they've come to a credential, they've attended trade show, they've done something that is our more in your face kind of things. Of the three legs that make up what we do for the members, advocacy, I think, is the one that's the most difficult to communicate, the one that's most difficult to kind of promote, but is, in my opinion, the one that makes the biggest difference in why somebody is a member with us. So many things happen, so many ordinances, potentially, so many laws that we have to try to either promote or, explain why this could be damaging to our industry, to potential lawmakers. I was fairly familiar with politics prior to, getting into this position, and I've always been kind of surface level interested and paid attention to things, but just understanding how the sausage is made, also getting involved with the actual process of talking to your elected officials, how difficult it is to get to talk to your elected officials, how that works, how those relationships play. All of that matters so much, because, and I truly do believe most of them, well, big asterisk on that most of them have best interests in mind, when they're looking at potentially making new laws. We had a local city of Jacksonville ordinance that was proposed a couple years ago by a city council member who's no longer on the council, but he had a concerned group of constituents come to him that there was a rental home on their street that was his, area, and that rental home had been rented to somebody, but they weren't living there. They had either subletted it or let somebody else move into it. And so there was a lot of activity happening at the house. They believed it to be criminal, and they thought there was a lot of things happening. Well, the police would investigate, but they couldn't get in touch with the owner of the home because the owner of the home had it as a secondary home, like an income source. They lived out of state, so they couldn't get in touch with the owners. Well, so, okay, that's a problem. If you're an elected official, you're hearing a problem from your constituents. You're going, okay, I will create a law that I think will solve this problem. And so I think in their mind, they're going, I'm going to solve a problem for the people who I represent. I understand the logic behind that. But the law that they presented had a ton of issues, right? It was a potential ordinance that required all of these things that were like, you had to have a specific contact information for every rental property. If you didn't have a person that lived on site, you had to have somebody who lived within X amount of miles of the rental property. Just all of these things that didn't make sense. And the way they threw the ordinance out, it would have blanketed all of apartment communities, which, how do you say to a property manager, oh, now due to this new law in Jacksonville, you actually have to live within 5 miles of the property that you work at, but also we might transfer you to a different property in 3 years, so like get a new house. Mm-hmm. It would have had a lot of really difficult implications that didn't make sense in a real world kind of way. And so we had to then go about the process of trying to educate our lawmakers on why I understand you've created this law to solve this one specific problem, but now what you've done is potentially created a ton of other issues for all of these people and like the 120,000 units that exist in Jacksonville, why this is such an issue. And so, thankfully the law didn't go anywhere and the ordinance never was passed by COJ, but that's part of what can happen is a lot of these people are trying to do something. They're trying to solve a problem. They think there's a problem. They're trying to solve it. What they don't understand is there's a million different implications. And also, it's unfair to assume that every elected official is an expert in everything. They may know a lot about one particular thing, but they may not know enough about something else. And so part of our job when we do the advocacy part is educating them on why this might be challenging for us or why this is needed. The ESA one is a really good example of that. Emotional support animals have been kind of a conversation topically, in our country. You get this, I think People Magazine even had a joke one about like, oh, people with like little mini horses on planes. It's a valid and necessary thing that exists in our society. There are people who need emotional support animals. There are people who have taken advantage of that because they want to not pay a pet fee or they want their dog to fly for free. And so there is a huge group of people that are taking advantage of the actual people in need of that. And so that was what we were seeing happen a lot of the places in our industry, and specifically housing and apartments, that people wanted to avoid paying a pet fee or avoid paying a security deposit. And so they would just say, oh, it was an emotional support animal, get a weird letter that they could then hand off. And there was no law. In fact, it was not, emotional support animals weren't even codified in Florida law. So that was something that we realized was an issue that we needed to at least codify to try to protect those people who were actual people who needed emotional support animals, to try to prevent or to discourage those people from lying about it. Because the more frequently people who didn't actually need ESAs, they just wanted to take their dog in a restaurant, well, that dog then misbehaves because that wasn't prepared for that, or that's not really what the dog is used to doing. So now the dog's like acting out or biting people or doing whatever. And so now everyone is looking at it being like people with ES, like emotional support animals, bad guys, like, you know, and it's just like, oh, why would you need that? Well, legitimately, there could be veterans who have been through something or dealing with PTSD, and their therapist have decided it's easier for them to handle a situation if they have that pet with them, or, you know, pet, emotional support animal, you know, with them to provide that. They can go into situations where they feel more comfortable. Like, there are legitimate reasons that people need those, which is also very different than also from, you know, and like disability support animals. So like a seeing eye dog, service eye, seeing eye dog, or, you know, the dogs that have been trained to find if you're going to have like a diabetic, you know, there's all of those. That's a whole different thing that's already been codified under ADA. But emotional support animals specifically, since it is sort of a newer thing, just didn't have a place in the law. And so that was something that our state took on for several years, and we worked to really convince and explain to the lawmakers why this was an issue and why it needed to be codified into law. There were some groups that opposed at first. Eventually, we were able to work with them and talk to them and come to, you know, a conclusion and an understanding of why and where and how this fit into our state statutes. And thankfully, they were able to pass the law, which we weren't the first one to pass it. I think we were like the 15th in the state. It was a very similar law that had been passed in other states, but it was, you know, it impacted our people in our apartment communities in the state of Florida. So that's a huge part of that. But there's a million things. I mean, during the pandemic, the eviction moratoriums, I mean, good Lord. On the state level, they were having to try to talk to the state Supreme Court, because the state Supreme Court hadn't issued guidelines on how some of these things had to be handled when it was unclear what was happening between DeSantis' moratorium and Trump's moratorium. And I mean, it was just, it was insane. So there's a lot of it that goes into the advocacy part, and a lot of that directly affects how multifamily can run their business. But again, it's kind of boring, and B, if that's not something you're interested in, it's hard to explain why that matters, that we stopped a law from happening that would have made you have to live within 5 miles of your apartment community.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important for the industry. I think the advocacy piece for associations, I mean, it's important to be aware of these things before they become law. So, you know, hey, this thing has been proposed. Let's really understand it. Is it going to benefit us? Is it good? So let's kind of help it through. Is it bad for us? So let's either try to get it killed or try to revise it. And before you can really do any of that, you've got to have a plan and relationships with those lawmakers. So, I mean, I think, and I don't know, but I think it's probably fair to say that most apartment associations throughout the country are doing this in some way. If you're one of the small localities, then maybe there's a larger state organization that's doing that. But I think that's one of the things that the association does that a lot of people just aren't aware of. One of the things that we started doing, I'd say maybe about a year ago, maybe longer than that, is sending out an update, a legal update of, okay, this is what we've done, this is what's on our radar. And I think that's helped inform everybody, because a lot of it goes on behind the scenes. I know we go to Tallahassee once a year and kind of do that in-person advocacy. That's a cool, I did that for the first time. I mean, we didn't do it last year because of the pandemic, but, the year before we did it in person. And I think it's funny when you say, you'd like to see how they make the sausage. I think it was also you that, kind of pointed out that first year when I went that it's like these, 18 to 20-year-old kids that are making all the decisions, because a lot of times you go to meet with the lawmaker and you end up meeting with the aide, who then takes all kinds of notes and basically tells the lawmaker what to do. Or, the lawmaker will be standing there and be like, and look at the aide and say, how do I feel about that again? It's like, okay, yeah, But I think
terrifying secret that 25-year-olds run our country. Terrifying secret.
But I mean, I think you're right. I think they're trying to do something that they think is good, and sometimes they don't have all the facts, or sometimes they don't understand the unintended consequences.
Well, and they're busy. I mean, Ted Yoho, I'll tell you a story because he's no longer in the house, but a couple years ago, we were helping to cover Gainesville. We had gone up to Washington, D.C. to do the Day on the Hill with the National Apartment Association. We had actually made an appointment with Yoho's office. We had an appointment with the aide, but he happened to come walking in, so he happened to have like 5 minutes. And he was like, come on in, yeah, I'll talk to you. So we're like, fantastic. So we're sitting there talking to him, and I believe it was, this was several years ago, so it was like tax reform, Section 8 reform, something else. There were several things, but so pretty in-depth, especially tax reform, right? Like we were talking about a lot of really specific things. And we're talking to him and he was like, yeah, obviously the goal is to get everyone into a home. And we're like, no, sorry, excuse me. The goal is to keep people in the apartments. We like that people rent. We want people to have the option to keep renting. Obviously, if they want to go live in a home, yeah. But like, we represent the apartments. And so we kind of had stopped him and said that, and we kept going. And again, we're talking about like, I don't know, flow through entities or something really complicated. And he's like, yeah, obviously the goal is we want people in single family homes. We want to get them in homes. And we kept being like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, no,
I don't think you're listening.
That's not us. That's the realtors. So it was just, and again, he had 5 minutes. He had no time. Here we are trying to explain this insanely complicated stuff to this man that we barely had an appointment with. And then he was like, cool, you want to take a picture? All right, we're out. Like, it was just, you're like, I'm like, half the time it is better to meet with the aides because at least they're just like, yes, here's what we feel about that. Like, they at least know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, just the facts, right? Here's what's good about it. Here's what's not so good about it. Here's why. But I even know, at the state level, we've even like drafted some bills and proposed that and say, hey, take this. We already did all the legwork. Like, push this through. And, like I said, I think that's one of the things that associations do kind of behind the scenes that a lot of members probably aren't aware of.
Yeah, a lot of members. Well, it's just like interest in politics. Some people care, some people don't. And so it's hard to explain, or it's not that sexy to explain, when you're getting into it. Also, a lot of times things happen really quickly. So one of the bigger challenges for us, at least, is if something's happening quickly, is how do you get your group engaged in that? If we need to make a campaign to contact a city council member, or we had one a couple years ago with a short-term vacation rental one that came up, and cool, regulate whatever you want on short-term vacation rentals. Doesn't matter to us.
Clarify it so it doesn't apply to us.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And so they were stepping over into our lane, and so we had to be like, stop it. And
I think the way that was worded, it was like any lease that was under a year, and 9-month, 10-month, 11-month leases are common, but would have fallen under that regulation. At the same time, they were trying to, you had like a nice neighborhood of homes and somebody had an Airbnb in the middle of it, and you get all these kids coming in to party on the weekend. And so again, they were trying to accomplish a good thing, unintended consequence. But I think that was easy to kind of explain and educate and, squash that one pretty.
Yeah, thankfully they listened. I don't remember exactly what they passed, to be fair, because once they told us, once they told us they had agreed that they had to adjust it to remove that language, I was like, cool, do you? Yeah. So it is. But that's, again, it's just, I was actually talking to, I think she's now the mayor of Jacksonville Beach, but she had a great
Christine
Hoffman.
Yeah, she planned my wedding.
Did she really?
She was. Oh my God! She was like the day of wedding planner at the venue at the time.
Oh, how funny! Yeah, I met her at a course that I took that had nonprofits in it, and she was there. That's really funny. But she had said, she used a really great description that sometimes lawmakers get really excited, and you have a pinpoint problem, you have a sniper problem, but you use a shotgun approach. And that's, I think, a very frequent situation that we end up in. That's a lot of the advocacy that we do, is that there's a really specific problem that they're trying to solve. And when they pass these sweeping legislations to try to do it, it ends up with this massive scattershot. And then you're going, oh, God, like, don't do that. So
it's a very Florida analogy.
Yeah, well, we're here. Might as well embrace it.
Okay, I definitely wanted to touch on the advocacy piece. Anything else there that you want to...
I think if that's anything anyone's ever been interested in, or, if there's so many parts of it. One of the biggest things, those are some of the really specific issues that we've discussed, but one of the greater things that we've been lobbying for forever is affordable housing. We have had research for, 5+ years. The National Association did a huge research project that we knew we didn't have enough housing. We knew we were lacking in housing, that our development wasn't keeping up with demand. And so now here we are getting into the thick of that, and we're still telling people, you have to remove these barriers to construction. We do not have enough housing, what people need. And here we are. Our occupancies are so high, rents are so high, housing prices are so high because we do not have the amount of housing that we need to balance out the amount of people that need it. There's so much land in Jacksonville is single family only zoned. I mean, and then what you get into is multifamily wants to develop. Well, there's only like small parcels that are multifamily. Then that's expensive, right? The land's expensive because supply and demand, and construction cost is expensive. And so you end up building luxury. Yeah. And so you're ending up with these high-end luxury communities because obviously developers are not in it for no money. And so they're not going to develop. They have investors they have to pay off. And so they're not going to develop unless they're going to make returns on it. And so we're not getting, enough housing, which is then supply and demand. There's not enough. Prices are expensive on apartments and rents are expensive. And it's just where we're at right now. In affordable housing, there's just, as bad as regular housing is, there's affordable housing we are sorely, sorely, sorely in need of. We have one of our companies that recently had told me a story, it's almost a year ago, but they had a brand new affordable tax credit community they had built. It was about 120 units. Came out of the ground. Before it opened, it was 100% leased. Before it opened, it was leased. And they had a paid wait list of 50% of the property. So they had if they had doubled the size of the community, they would have had another 50% of that already paid. And those people had paid them deposits without even having apartments. They just wanted desperately to be on the wait list.
Yeah. So if we could incentivize the construction of affordable units, that they would pretty much lease themselves, and maybe we could make a dent in the housing crisis.
Yeah, there are people in need of that, and we do not have the housing for it. I mean, that's a lot of, and again, that's where it's not sexy to talk about the advocacy part, right? Like, hey, we're trying to just get a state law passed that allows local governments to incentivize with, tax cuts. And people, they hear the word taxes, they're like, they just, they don't want to hear about it. They start shaking and they don't care.
Well, I mean, at the same time too, I mean, you talk about lawmakers trying to do the right thing. They'll all stand there and tell you that they want to help solve the housing problem, and we need more affordable housing. Well, great. Here's so let's check both boxes here. That I think the way that makes sense is a little bit of a tax break. You could do that a few different ways, and
tax
break.
Yeah, exactly, and that's part of the problem. I mean, but even then, like Sudowski. So the Sudowski Fund has existed for years. This is something anybody who's ever attended our state lobby day is fully aware of Sudowski. But again, that money is set aside every single year to build affordable single-family and multifamily apartments to rehab them and do all those things. And it always gets swept. It gets swept into something else because there's a need somewhere else. So the state goes, oh, well, we need that money over here. So sorry, housing. And so despite the fact that we knew this was coming, now it's coming to a head, and we're going, we've been telling you for years we need more housing, and you've refused to listen, and now everyone's going, oh, it seems like we got a problem. There's not enough housing. Everything's really expensive.
And now if there wasn't a raw material issue, we still couldn't build it fast enough.
Yeah.
So,
that's a whole other thing. So it's very complicated and it's tough, but I mean, that's balanced housing, affordable housing, more housing, removing those barriers to construction. That has been just the drum that we have beat for years now, and we'll continue to beat, and we'll hopefully start to finally make some headway on, because I think now lawmakers are going, oh, I am hearing from my constituents that there's not enough places to live, and that it's expensive to buy, it's expensive to rent, and that's a problem for people. So, I think we're starting to finally get some headway on the lawmakers, that they're starting to understand, like, this is a real problem. It's not just us saying, like, we'd like to build some more apartments.
It's a real problem that had a pretty realistic solution, years ago, and now it's a bigger problem, and probably harder to solve.
Which is just gonna make it more fun.
I guess. So I came across a question online the other day. And I know how I answered it, but I'm curious how you would. And so the question was basically, are the NAA designations, the CAM, the NALP, those sorts of things, are they worth it?
Ooh, good question.
And it was that general. Now, I'll tell you what I said, but I just want to kind of leave it as you stumbled into that question. How would you answer that question?
All right. Oh, you're not giving me your...
No,
okay.
because I don't want you, because I don't think you disagree with the way that I answered it, but I'm curious.
You don't want to color my response?
Yeah, I don't want to like lead you down a certain way, you know?
Yes, I think they're worth it. Do I think we have a lot of new opportunities and places we could go with the credentials? Absolutely. Unlike the realtors, for example, our people don't need exams to be able to do this job. Nor do I think they should have to, do an exam or have a license or anything like that. But the credentials specifically are a great opportunity to prove that you have that knowledge. I mean, what sets you apart? If we're both applying for the same property management job, you're a property manager, I'm a property manager, or maybe we both have 5 years of experience, and we go in and I'm interviewing and I'm able to say, I've earned my certified apartment manager credential. I have passed this exam. I have been tested, and I can tell you that I have the knowledge of all of these things. And you come in and you're like, yeah, no, I do my job fine. And so it just gives somebody an opportunity. I mean, you'd be like,
I'm going to say that next time.
I do my job fine.
Do my job fine.
Sometimes I'm okay with it.
Right. Sure, most days.
So it gives you an opportunity to be able to say, I have been tested and I know these things. CAM specifically intimidates people because so much of it's math. It really does get into the stuff of how do you run a property? How do you figure out, your, say rent per square feet, but like that's not even that difficult. But like it gets into like the nitty gritty of really when you're assessing the value of your property and how do you do that?
All the way down to, if I'm going to raise rent $100 a unit, what does that do to the value of the property?
Exactly. It really does say, I know this thing. And there are other credentials. I mean, CPM, I know a lot of people get that one. There's a lot of things that exist in kind of in our space. But I think if you are an apartment manager and you want to be able to say, I know what I'm doing, then having your CAM is an excellent way of doing that. CAM-T, I think, in our state, it's a little different because we specifically have a law that relates to your scope of work. So certainly if you were a maintenance professional in our state, that earning your CAM-T is essential. Also, especially to double that down in Jacksonville and Duval County, because we have another license that's required that you can earn is the same time you earn your CAM-T. So I definitely think CAM-T on the maintenance side is, if that is a career path that you're interested in pursuing and moving up into a supervisor position, CAM-T is clutch. CALP, I think is moving up in prominence. They just redid it. It used to be in ALP, and they've now rehashed it into CALP, Certified Apartment Leasing Professional. I think with the update, it's become more valuable. It's more up to date. It's more current, the way that an actual leasing professional is kind of dealing with those things.
Do you know if it's a prerequisite for the CAM?
It is not.
Okay.
No. So, because some people didn't start in leasing. Some people may start in a different path. So, it's not. And then CAPS is, of course, the more multi-portfolio one, which, again, they're constantly adding new information. They're constantly redoing them. So I think they're very valuable in a way that sets you apart from other people and says, I know what I'm doing. I think there's a lot of opportunities, though, for other things that could be credential related. I think intro kind of courses are something that we need more of, especially right now, right? We've got this hiring issue. We need more people. Also, you're already short-staffed on your property, so now you've brought in this new person. Do you have time to sit down and do a full training on them when you're already running ragged to try to do all these other things? So I think there's an opportunity for developing potentially not necessarily credential, but credential level of intro. What can we do that gets you from the door to leasing, where you're at least getting the solid basics, so that somebody could have you take this course and then you could come back and be like, okay, and now you only have to train them on the Highmark way or the Graystar way or whatever. You only have to do the corporate stuff. You don't have to do the full, what's fair housing? How do you take a tour? What do you do with this? Safety, all the stuff that is important that a leasing agent knows before they're out on their own. So I think there's a lot, same with maintenance. I think there's a ton of intro stuff that could be done and created so that people are able to kind of hit the ground running, because all those credentials are not necessarily high level, but at least a year plus of experience. So CAM-T is at least a year. CAM, I would suggest good, I mean, again, just because you're getting some of the weeds on the math, I would say you need I think the requirement is a year, but a lot of times we see a better success if people have at least 2 years in the industry. But yeah, I think they're worth it. I think it sets you apart. I think it gives you an opportunity to say, I know what I'm talking about, and people are willing to go, oh, you got your CAM. All right, well, you passed that test. Because the test is a beast. Yeah, that's my thought on it. What was yours?
Well, so for me, first, I think we need to define what worth it is. So
did you want to have a really deep
shortcut
existential conversation here? Did we want to talk about the meaning of life and what's worth it?
No, but I think the clarification is the things that you have control over and the things that you don't have control over. So like you talked about, it displays a certain level of knowledge, and that if you're interviewing and all things are equal and you've got your CAM and the other person doesn't, I would say in most cases I would lean that way. But what you don't have control over is that person that's hiring, the one that's doing the interviewing. And so it's not going to guarantee that you're going to get a job. It doesn't guarantee you're going to get a job faster than someone else. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to make more money than someone else. But I can guarantee that you're going to learn at least one thing in every one of those designation classes. And that is good for you, so that alone, just the knowledge piece, is worth it. The people that are in there that you get to meet, that networking piece, that sharing of knowledge, that's worth it. And if you continue to do that in other classes as well, whether they're local or whatever it is, that's self-development, then eventually you will get hired faster than other people and you will make more money than other people. So, the designations, absolutely, and just any kind of self-development, any training, I think is always worth it.
Yeah, one of the worst things I think anybody can do in any position is assume they know everything. As soon as you get somebody that's complacent in a job, in any job, right? Sales, association management, any of those things, if all of a sudden I'm sitting here being like, I know everything and I'm just so bored and you're terrible at your job at that point. I mean, if you don't think there's a thing you can't learn that improves you and improves your job, then you're just not, then you're very unself-aware.
Well, and then, I'd say the kind of unintended consequence, if you're someone that goes and gets your CAM, I mean, obviously I know what that training's like, so I know what you've had to do to pass that test, but to me, as a hiring manager, it also says something about you and your willingness and your desire to go do that, especially the CAM, because we know how hard that is. I mean, personally, I did the CAM-T, and then when I switched to the supplier side, I did the CAS, the Certified Apartment Supplier. I think that's a great one, especially for new suppliers, because it kind of gives you an idea of the industry. And for those that aren't aware of the class, I mean, you sit in some of the CAM classes with CAM students. So, you're a supplier sitting there with property managers or potential property managers. I mean, there's a networking piece that happens there too. Like I said, I think, anything self-development is always worth it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you're taking something and getting absolutely nothing out of it, I think that says, it says a little something about you.
Or maybe that you should be considering instructing, right? If you can sit through a class and then all of a sudden you know everything. I mean, if you truly are a subject expert, then maybe your next step of development is how do you instruct others to know that information? I mean, it doesn't do anyone any good to be an island thinking they know everything. Because I'll use Chris Milishon. She's one of our amazing instructors, one of our best volunteers. But she does a lot of our maintenance instruction for us. But she said to me the other day, and I just thought it was so wonderful, she teaches CAM-T, and so she teaches several modules in that, and she said, every time I teach, I learn something from one of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a lovely thing to say. To be able to say, even as the instructor who's coming in as the subject expert, who has taught this class year after year after year, and she said every time she teaches the class, she learns something new from one of the people who's in the class. Mm-hmm. And I was like, then see, that's the idea, is that we're constantly changing, we're constantly learning more, constantly evolving, elevating your position, elevating that knowledge, elevating the industry.
Yeah. Well, like I said, those are the people that I'd want to hire. Mm-hmm. And, so the more you do these, the more you take these classes, you will get to that getting hired faster and making more money. But that piece we don't have control over is, I can't guarantee the person that looks at your resume and just say, oh, you have a CAM, and, he doesn't, and everything else was the same, so I'm going with you. Yeah. If you ask me, it probably should go that way, but you don't have control over that other person.
No, and again, to move into that world, you also have to potentially make it something that's required. For it to matter in that way, you have to move into it being like a credential that you have to get. And that's not really a thing that we want to have to do. We don't want to have to look at the extra licensing on that stuff. I mean, as it is, on the maintenance side, the extra licensing is tough. Like, it's just so much. There's so many layers of the extra stuff you have to do and have and pass. And so. Yeah,
so to combine the designations with the advocacy, I don't think that we should ever lobby to make the designations required. Now, I know that it happened in some places, sort of indirectly, like, for us here in Florida, that you pretty much have to have a CAMT to do certain maintenance tasks in the state. Yeah. And then locally in Duval County, they had their own license, that PMC license, and we were able to change that so that instead of taking its own test, that if you had a CAMT, they would just give you this PMC. So, and I'm sure that exists elsewhere.
In both of those situations, that was because the contractors lobbied and won, right? Mm-hmm. The contractor said, we want to protect this scope of business. Yeah. We don't want maintenance people to be able to touch this. We don't want them to be able to do this maintenance. We want it to be in our book. And so we were able to carve out both of those things because we went against the contractor saying, hey, our guys are trained. They can do this scope of work, because otherwise it had been codified that they could not legally touch those things. So yeah, I mean, that was a long time it took to make that happen.
I think, and again, the country's a big place, but I think for the most part that is unique to Duval County. Otherwise, I think there's a whole podcast conversation around that and how that unfolded, and what that could look like. But I don't know that applies to enough people to fall down that rabbit hole. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking too, so last week I sat down with Sonny, and in the sea of acronyms that I live in between my current job and just the industry and the Navy and just everything, I talked about NOI as being non-operating income instead of net operating income.
That's net income,
yeah. Sound like an idiot when I listen back to the podcast.
Oh, that's nice. Is that the first time you've thought that? Oh, how nice for you.
Okay. Wow. But it makes me wonder if, maybe getting, some of the people that instruct on the CAM and just, kind of talk through some of that stuff and see if that helps with, some of the nerves or, the preparation.
Yeah. The intimidation that people feel about testing is obviously just it's not specific to this exam. It's people are intimidated about exams and testing, and specifically one that has, high level algebra, which most people have not attempted since high school. So it's very intimidating for people, specifically for CAM. We have great instructors, and I think people get prepared for the exam, but I think a lot of the times people get in their own heads and go, oh, I'm not going to pass. And so then they just don't even want to find out. Yeah. They're more comfortable with the idea of not knowing whether they would pass or fail than to find out if they actually would pass or fail and then figure out what they have to do with that.
Well, one of my favorite things that, about the designations is I think you need an 80 to pass, right? Is that right? It might be lower than that. I think it's an 80.
I think it's an 80.
But
there's not a specific question number. Like, it's very ambiguous because they don't want it to be, obviously it's for the safety of the test.
But it doesn't print on the exam. So, mm-hmm. If you get an 80, you got 100. And if you get a 79, you got a 0.
Yeah.
So, pass-fail. Give it a whirl. You don't need to get 100. Obviously that cushion's in there because they don't expect you to get everything because of the nerves and those sorts of things. So, for any of you that are coming up on the, you took your class and you're coming up on the end of the time window to take the exam, give it a whirl. What's the worst that could happen?
You've already paid for it too. You might as well. You might as well know. I would always rather know. The only way to the other side is through. So you would always rather know. But.
Yeah, and I think that it opens up to kind of the local level training too. So obviously those designations are taught locally, but they're national classes. You've got a structure and topics and stuff you need to stick to. But I think for me, one of the greatest things about the local associations is that training. when I was coming up as a maintenance guy, I came into the industry with no experience, and I would take every class I possibly could. And, next year when the same class comes up, I'm going to take it again, because maybe there's someone else in the class that's going to, like Chris says, you learn something from someone in the class. I mean, maybe something else comes up, or it's explained in a different way, or there's a piece you forgot that. So, I mean, I think there's a ton of value, definitely for the maintenance, but I think in general, we do a lot of fair housing classes and legal seminars, and I mean, it's just the training that happens locally, I think, is massive. And if there's a gap that you've identified that, hey, I wish there was a class for this, well, I mean, let's make one.
Yeah, I mean, on two levels. Yes, that's why we want as many volunteers and as many voices speaking to us as possible, because we want to know what information we can help with, right? So if there's a thing that's existing in this world that we need to create a class to help, educate people on, then we want to know that. We would rather have people giving us that feedback so that we can go, oh, wow, I didn't know that even was an issue. Like, what can we do? Who can we bring in? We did active shooter a couple years ago. That was something we'd heard from several people that we needed to provide some training on, and that was great. We were able to provide that, which, again, unless somebody had said that to me, I wouldn't even have thought, yeah, obviously, great education to provide. So landlord, tenant, and fair housing, I think, talk about learning something new every single time. The amount of change that those things fluctuate so constantly, maybe not for housing as much, but I mean, legal is, you dealt with the moratorium, and now we have this 30-day CARES Act that people still have to have if you're a CARES-covered property. And the laws have changed so dramatically in the last couple of years. Landlord-tenant is always a huge class, and that's always, obviously, the one that people really take a lot away from. Fair housing, we like to bring in instructors that are the Human Rights Coalition in Jacksonville. We like to hear every single option of it so that our people can hear what's really happening, like what kind of complaints they are getting, because then they can take it back to their own properties. There was stuff I had never even heard of, like the signage in your pool had to have it's just stuff that I had never even knew it existed, even though I'm pretty familiar with fair housing. So it was just, it's always really interesting to bring in those kind of people that are experts and can have that information, because, again, also too, in those classes specifically, somebody always raises their hand and goes, well, what about this? And everyone's like, I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I think it was at the state level they were talking about, there was a specific person that was calling around to properties and trying to bait you into something. And if you said the wrong thing, that, here comes your lawsuit, knowing that more than likely you're just going to settle for a small sum of money that, is small to you, but significant to this person. And so they just sit at home and baiting and dialing and trying to make some money.
They were calling properties saying they had a criminal background, and they were waiting for the property to say, you can't live here if you have a criminal background, which is not something you can legally say. So they were waiting for the properties to say that, and as soon as a property did, they would bring a class action against them. The properties would say, it was like 19 properties or something. I mean, but again, there's your training, right? Like, that leasing agent probably didn't mean to say that. They probably meant to say, yeah, we have criminal criteria. And if you're on the phone being kind of aggressive, which, as I understand, the person that was calling would be kind of aggressive and combative with the person on the phone, the leasing person on the phone. So if you're dealing with somebody who's just like kind of yelling at you and angry at you on the phone, and you're just like, I don't know, I'm so sorry, like, criminal background, okay, like, we don't have, okay. So you might have just said the wrong thing, and now but that's training that person needs to have. That person needs to know you cannot say that. Mm-hmm. You have to say, we have a screening criteria, everybody is eligible to apply. And you can give more information about your screening criteria, but you can't say there's a blanket denial. And yeah, now obviously I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. Let me start there.
Well, that's it.
But
I mean, even with those seminars, right, I think when most of these issues come up, get with your attorney, get with your management company, those things. But to sit in these classes with that room full of people and kind of hear what the big hot buttons are and how they're being handled, I mean, at least it arms you with some more facts when you do encounter that, things that are working for other people, what didn't work that you need to avoid.
Well, and I would hope that when somebody hears that story, they then go back to their own property and go, we need to make sure everybody knows and is familiar with our screening criteria and the appropriate ways to answer those questions. Because maybe they hadn't refreshed on it in a couple of years, because you get kind of complacent on that. You know how to lease. You forget how to say the exact correct things, or, and those things, fair housing does change. We have not had it happen in our county, but several counties in the state of Florida have added source of income as a protected class. And that's something that was brand new. And it's happened within the last couple of years. So if you're in that area or if you move to that area, that's a whole different ballgame, you know? So it just, those things do change, they evolve. It's important to stay up to date with it and to know that information, because you may be that one person that accidentally says the same thing you've been saying for 5 years, but now that's not accurate. And because even the criminal thing, I mean, that happened with Disparate Impact a couple of years ago. That was the Supreme Court that gave that, you know, advice. So it's very complicated, and it's easy to get caught up in a situation where somebody can just throw a lawsuit at you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another reason to stay involved with the association, take the classes. You know, we covered the advocacy piece.
You speak good.
I do. I speak very good. There was something else I couldn't spit out on one of these things. I'm sure they'll get more embarrassing as time goes on. It's great. Maybe I'll make a highlight reel of all the mistakes. Yeah.
There you go. I like that. I'm trying not to like blow the speaker every time I put this down.
So I kind of had like an idea of the way that this was going to flow, but it didn't go that way. So sure, I feel like we're like we're getting to where I would have started is, you know, look, why, you know, if I'm a supplier, if I'm on site as, you know, maintenance, property manager, whatever, you know, why would I want to be a member of the association, right? And maybe we break those down separately, you know, the on-site staff and the supplier side. So I think there's different reasons other than the stuff we covered for education and advocacy.
Well, so the three legs of the association are education, advocacy, and networking. Each member finds different value in each of those things, but all of those things bring value to the membership. The education piece, obviously, you get access to the education. You get, we send out that information, right? So during the pandemic, we tried to send out as much information as possible regarding specifically things like the moratoriums and the CARES Act and all those laws that were changing at lightning speed. There were days I had just done an update and it was like 2 minutes later, some other thing passed and I'm going, oh God, sending it out again. So it was happening at lightning speed, but that's what happens. And so, you know, being a member means that we're able to connect with you and you're able to get that information. And so you're not having to accidentally do the wrong thing or not know. And, you know, again, potentially litigation or whatever. So that's definitely one of the benefits as far as being a community member. Specifically for ours, if you're a community member, you have access to the Click and Lease, which is the National Apartment Association, previously known as the Blue Moon Lease. It's the gold standard in leases. A lot of people don't understand that your lease has to be the most legally up-to-date lease to be counted as a legal document. So if you're just copying and pasting the same lease that you've used for 3 years, that is probably not going to stand up in court because it is not up to date with whatever the new laws that have passed. And so I've just used the same lease, but you've not updated it with all the things that are changing, which takes a Herculean effort of lawyers and our national group to be able to do, to make sure that they're updating that at all times. They're drilling down into all the different municipalities to make sure, like, so ours will be a COJ lease that will have all of the specific things that are specific to just Jacksonville. Because again, that lease goes in front of a judge and it's not been updated in a couple of years, and now that law is different, then that legal document is no longer binding. So they signed it, but it doesn't matter because they didn't sign the right one.
Yeah, I guess the hope is that it'll never come to that, but if it did, the last thing you want to hear is that you can't hold your resident to something that was in the lease.
Trying to evict somebody and it's not the right lease, and the judge goes, this isn't legally binding. You don't owe them anything, bye. And now you're just out. So no, you protect yourself by using the most legal potential document, because obviously the most conversations that happen that are, you know, in litigation or, you know.
All right, well that was a first.
Technical difficulty.
So yeah, I will try to, you know, cut the video in the middle and put this back together so that we don't lose too much of that. But
I accidentally binged on have you listened to the Always Sunny podcast that just came out?
No.
So it's the guys from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I accidentally binged like all 5 episodes yesterday. And when they say something stupid, they go, cut that. So you need to just start. Just be like, cut that. That's when you know where to edit.
But if you heard them say that part, then obviously...
Then they'd be like, I'll leave it in, it's fine.
Exactly, yeah.
It was really funny, though. If you haven't listened to it, you should. It's so entertaining.
I'll check it out. Yeah, as we covered in our first conversation, I listened to, ridiculous amounts of random podcasts, so, yeah.
You're keeping me from, like, a Bachelorette recap right now, but, like, whatevs. I'm here.
Yeah, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. I used to watch The Bachelorette.
Sure.
I think we've talked about this, which is why you seem less surprised than some people probably are, but, whatever. So obviously the lease is an important aspect from the property perspective.
The lease, education, the advocacy. I think, obviously from the community side, a lot of the advocacy that we do is obviously, majority of the advocacy is for the community side. And the networking. If you're a property, we had just recently a business exchange, sort of kind of a reverse trade show. And we have a new property management company. They just took over an entire portfolio. They're coming into Jacksonville. They've never been in our area. And they have no vendors. They have no suppliers. So it was just a great opportunity for them to get to meet the suppliers that were here locally so they could start working on that. They didn't have national contracts in place. So that was a great opportunity for them to get to set up some contracts for their properties that they had just taken over. So the networking is really important on that side. On the associate side, it's the opposite of that, right? We're a very relationship-based industry. People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And what are better ways to get to know people, to get to like people, and to build that trust is then to have some time with them where you're at a trade show or at an event or at the holiday party, where you get to spend some time, chat with that person, and then you go, oh, okay, you're a pretty nice person. Maybe we have that meeting. And then you start talking like, oh, okay, you're selling me something pretty decent. I understand this, or we've looked at this and it's cost effective. And, that's where the business comes from. I know it is different in some different markets. Jacksonville is real relationship based. I sold in Orlando. It was a little different, but our industry historically is very relationship based. So it does help somebody to get to know somebody and to be at those things. And that's where we see, I've seen people come in and companies come in and they get involved and they get to know people, and all that sudden that business grows, and all of a sudden they're the ones that everyone's using.
Well, I think you get out of it what you put into it. So if you think that you're just going to, sign up and they're going to be beaten down the door, that's certainly not the case. Same thing from an education standpoint. If you're listening going, well, we don't have any good education. Okay, well, let's make some. Mm-hmm. You get out of it what you put into it. As a supplier, one of my favorite things to do is sponsor lunches for some of the classes that go on, because you can pick a class that has a topic that is going to attract the people that you want to talk to. So we sponsor a lot of maintenance classes, but I love doing the landlord-tenant law because that one's a packed house, and you can talk about different things, with that audience. So
I use the analogy that we are a baseball game. What?
One big inbred family.
No, God. The best part about that is that you're like, I am aware that it was not the right thing to say, but I'm going to double
I'm leaning
down
into it. That's right. Just lean in.
No, I use the analogy that it's like a baseball game, right? I provide the stadium, I provide the players, but you're the one that has to step up to the bat and make the sale. I can get you in a room with people. You come to my event, I can get you in a room with decision makers, but I'm not going to sit over there and make your sale for you. So you have to be the one that steps up to bat. You have to talk to those people. You have to come to things. You have to build those relationships. You have to do that work. So yeah, 100% you do get into it, what you put out of it. But the opportunity is there. I'm telling you, I have seen company after company come in brand new, little shy, they don't know anybody. All of a sudden, 2 years later, they are the one everyone is using, everyone knows, and everyone loves them. So it's just, there's a lot of opportunity. The advocacy works for our suppliers as well. We have certainly advocated on many different topics that have affected our suppliers and how they can do business. And the education as well. We've offered supplier success courses. We've offered sales courses. We've done those things as well to give them the opportunity to improve in their jobs. So we try to do a lot of things for a lot of people to help do whatever we can to support the apartment industry and to help elevate that for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening and you're thinking, hey, this isn't good, that, it's not good with your association, or you wish it was better, then, I challenge you
Move to Jacksonville and join the First Coast Apartment Association.
Okay, so that first, but if you can't do that, I challenge you to hop on a committee. I mean, there's no, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but I don't think there's any solid commitment to being on a committee. If there's a committee meeting, you show up and, listen, voice your opinion, do what you can to help. And if next week or next month when there's a meeting you can't make it, it's not a huge deal.
No, it's not a huge deal. We do want people to give consistent, input, but
Absolutely.
we also understand, I mean, it's the same thing with anything. Nobody can come to everything. Everyone has lives and, families. So it is important that, you don't have to feel like you have to come to everything, but it does help people and to be involved, engaged on those committees. It does help because that additional feedback, like I said, there are blind spots that we don't even know exist, and we don't know because nobody's told us. But the more people we can talk to and the more that they can be like, hey, did you know that you're no longer allowed to paint communities jalapeno green? And then we're like, well, no, I didn't know that. So now we have to talk to the legislators about why did you outlaw jalapeno green? Fun fact, there is a community that was painted jalapeno green. They told me that was the name of the paint. And I thought it was...
Was that outlawed? Is this like a real advocacy
It is
thing?
not.
Okay.
It is not. I don't know if it's still painted that color. This was several years ago. But they repainted it, and I remember the manager was like, no, it's jalapeno green was the name of the color. And I remember just being like, that is an accurate description.
Okay, so you learn something new in everything you do. If you take anything away from this podcast, I guess
green.
Jalapeno green's an actual color. Check out your local,
Paint distributor.
That's right. Wow, I was going to go somewhere with that, too.
I really drilled you with jalapeno
Yeah, you
green.
lost me on the jalapeno green.
This is how I do business.
Yeah, I mean, I can't push for that enough because, yeah, if you think that, you're not a member, you're not an active member because the association doesn't do what it is that you want it to do, whether the training's not good or, the events aren't the right events or, I mean, whatever it is, then, you can sit back and complain about it and nothing's going to change, or, you can attend these things and either find out why it is the way it is because it can't be changed, or let's change it. Let's mold it into something that is better for, the majority of the members.
That's the goal.
Yeah, I don't think any association would argue with trying to do something that is going to enhance the organization and provide more value to more of the members.
No, we're a living, breathing thing. I mean, it's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing, and all with input and moment. And I mean, we certainly learned that in the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, and I don't know how many people have stuck to this either. But I know, during the pandemic, a lot of those committee meetings added a Zoom option. And I imagine some associations has stayed with that. So, again, you can get involved without even leaving the office. At the very least, listen. But, at the very most, be active, share an opinion and, maybe mold something into something that's going to be better. I mean, the associations are a sum of its members. So the more active you are, the better the association is going to be. I can't say enough about them, especially from a networking perspective. I mean, when I started as a groundskeeper, I attended every event and every class that I could just to meet people, to share knowledge, and to meet people to, move on up in the world. And
our volunteers and our members truly are awesome. We have a great group, and they're great people, and it's fun. Our events are fun. It's nice to be around people. We just got a good group here. So,
well, and take it one step further, right? So you've been on a few committees, had some fun, enjoyed it, added some value. Thinking about moving up to a board position. I mean, what does
are you stepping down right now? Is that what's happening?
No.
Oh, is this your resignation?
Should it be? Do you want it to be?
No.
I'm a little confused. So I am a board member at the First Coast Apartment Association 2017, I think. A couple of terms.
Sure.
Just 'cause, like I said, I'm a firm believer in doing everything I can to help. So started when I was a maintenance tech. I was on the maintenance committee. I was on the maintenance mania committee because I felt like that's where I could offer some value and that's where it'd be helpful. And over the years, I've kind of moved on up. What does an ideal board member candidate look like?
Oh, that's a great question.
I don't know.
I don't say nice things to you. What does an ideal board candidate look like? Ryan Reynolds, I think.
Not visually.
Okay. Sure. Somebody who has a desire to move the association forward. I think a desire to learn, because very frequently people who are moving into it's a voluntary board position, but very frequently most people have not been on boards before. Most people have not sat in a boardroom. Most people have not done, Robert's Rules of Order or minutes or some of the more specific parts of governance of a nonprofit. So that person has to be interested in learning. Because, unless we got very lucky and somebody had all that knowledge coming into our board, most of our volunteer leaders have not had that experience. Now, you gain that, right? We offer education opportunities. We talk about it during the board meetings. A lot of people, once they have some of the experience, it flows, it makes sense. But they have to be interested in learning kind of form and function of how that works. They have to be willing to support the industry and to have those tough conversations. The conversations that happen in our boardroom, you kind of said it earlier, you can either be a part of the conversation or you can sit back and complain. And what we need are the leaders who are willing to have those difficult conversations and say, what does the vision of this look like? Where is our future? Where are we going? The board operates at 20,000 feet. They're looking at where are we going? What is the vision? How do we move this association forward and elevate our industry and support our members? So those are tough conversations, how do you figure all that out? So we need people who are willing to be engaged and have opinions and to have those discussions. It doesn't do me any good to have people who just show up and sit there and, although if they are Ryan Reynolds and you're listening, you're welcome to sit in on any of our board meetings.
I will be sure to tag Ryan Reynolds when I post this everywhere. Let's see what happens.
But just to, we need those people to have those conversations and to do that work, because that's work, right? That's having that conversation. To support our initiatives that mostly they've put in place, to do all those things. And so we need those people who, you don't have to be experts at everything, but you have to be an expert at the thing you're bringing to the table. And whether that's just, we had this conversation recently, I don't need 18 people that are all financially minded. I need several people that are financially minded, but I need creative people. I need people who are network minded and social media minded and all of those things, because I need to have a group of resources of leaders who can all have that conversation, because kind of similar to the politicians, right? If you're only talking about one lane, you're not realizing there's a million other things that affects. And so I need people with lots of different information and backgrounds, because when we start having that conversation, the financial people might be like, well, this is black and white. Here's the thing. And I may have somebody over here that's like, did you not think that this could potentially be an issue? So it's all of those voices are what make a good group of leaders. I think we have a particularly great group right now that's all very engaged. They're all, working toward a similar goal. We just did strategic planning, which was really exciting, planning the next 3 to 5 years of where we go as an association. And
I was there.
Yeah. Great. Cool. It's not a fun day, but again, you need people who are willing to sit in a room for an entire day to talk about the nitty gritty of that. And those are the leaders that are engaged. Those are the people that care. And so I do think we have a really great group of board members right now, who are willing to do that. But that's what the leadership looks like. And that's, once somebody starts getting involved in the committees and they start attending things, they kind of understand it. Leadership Lyceum, our state Florida Apartment Association does an incredible Leadership Lyceum course, which they bring people together all across the state at their different meetings, discussing what does some of that information, right? Like, what does board service look like? How does that work? What are your liabilities? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And so it's important to kind of have some of that information. I think going through that program is a great way to foster potential leaders. There's just lots of different opportunities and lots of different room for service there. But
and I imagine that other associations have done it. I know some have. I don't know if all have, but we have the Next Gen Committee, which is some of those emerging leaders, and I think that's a good place to start getting people involved and getting them experience on committees, and then get them into other committees, and it helps you kind of groom some of those people into future board members.
Our next gen is great. They have a lot of excitement and interest in a lot of things, and it's always fun to go to those meetings because they always just, they're excited. Like they have a lot of initiatives and things they want to do, and that's just a fun energy to be around. And then I also get people that are like, "Oh, I'm old gen." You're not. Just because we call one thing. But it's just, there's a lot of opportunities. So I think next gen is an incredible opportunity. I think maintenance is also one where it's a really good pathway to service. We have a lot of representation on what you call like the quote unquote office side. But I think we also have a ton of great volunteerism and great people and great information that can be learned from the maintenance side. So that's such a huge part of what we do. And I mentioned earlier, but Chris Marshall's a great version of that. She gives us so much information and so much perspective that's regarding maintenance that, again, if we didn't have that voice in the room, we would be missing huge chunks of what could be important to the association. So, I know that's been a strategic plan for us, is to diversify as much as possible with our leadership. What can we do to make sure we're getting all of that voices and all of that information so that we're not missing something really critical?
So we can convince them right now that whether you're a supplier, you're on the maintenance side, you're on the office side, wherever you are, if you heard any part of this and thought, I don't like that in my association, well, then get on a committee, get out there and do something about it. And I think that applies in life, but that's a much deeper podcast.
God. We're getting into like the meaning of life here?
No.
Existentialism?
Well, I mean, that's pretty much the things I wanted to touch on with you, now that we could introduce you and dive into some association stuff.
I'm just proud that you only know 3 people and that it took 2 whole other interviews to get back to me.
So today's the first of the month. Obviously, this won't post today, so I think it'll probably post tomorrow. But, for those that are listening now, trying to find property managers that are willing to meet and record on the first of the month might have been some poor planning on my part.
A bit dicey.
Yep. And then, of course, I think you all know the nature of the industry, too. I mean, so I've had a few people cancel day of or day before because just crazy stuff happens. And when they come on in the future, we will absolutely talk about the crazy thing that happened and shame them for canceling last minute.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I know there are several other people that you have scheduled, and I know that purely I was the last minute option because my office is down the hall.
Yes, so this is not my kitchen table. We record in the boardroom here at the Apartment Association because it's a good room. It's small. The audio's good. The table's good. The logo looks good up on the wall. But it's so there's a lot for me to learn in this process. I am not a podcaster. This is nothing.
I think you can officially call yourself a podcaster.
I mean, I guess I am officially, yeah. I don't know whether I'm a good one or not is a whole different story.
I think next year you put in for the People's Choice Awards.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
But there's a guy that fights like Mike Tyson and stuff. I mean, there's some people that do some crazy stuff on these things, so it's not going to be me. Yeah, what's his name? He fought Mayweather, and he's a boxer, and he's a podcaster, and he does all these like $1 million pay-per-views.
Paul Logan?
Yeah, that guy. Yeah. And the other guy, Logan Paul?
I don't know,
I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so I mean, there's all those guys that have like millions. I'm happy when there's like 100 views.
Yeah, I'm not a youth, nor am I cool. So I very rarely am up to date on the cool people and the cool things that people are doing.
Okay.
I just sit at home with my White Claw and cry. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that'll be the screenshot I use for the cover of the podcast. Your face, and I just sit at home with my White Claw.
Sponsored by White Claw? Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
If I could get endorsed, just like as a personal human being, if I could get just like a White Claw endorsement, I would be so happy.
We talked about designations making it easier for you to get hired. I think certain endorsements might make it harder. I'm not sure.
How does that work in a job interview? You're like, hi, I'm so nice to meet you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Excuse me, why is there a White Claw logo on your resume?
Yes, I am endorsed, professionally endorsed by White Claw. Thank you so much for asking.
Lovely t-shirt.
Thank you so much for asking.
God. All right. Well, any final words of wisdom?
No
is an acceptable answer.
Okay. No, I'm going to be intelligent and concise, and it's going to sound awesome. Join your local apartment association. Get involved. Yep.
Yeah, so seriously, so the goal here wasn't necessarily to plug associations. I think that's what happened.
Is that not what we're doing?
No, it's not what we're doing, but I think that's
okay.
what happened because they bring so much value. They are necessary. And like I said, if any of you are listening, you disagree with me, then I challenge you to get involved or message me and, I'll help you get involved. How about that?
There you go.
All right.
See if you can do it better.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.